What is up, everybody? Matt Moda here to give you my favorite NFL player prop picks. We're talking the Sunday NFL betting slate, so every single game on Sunday. I'm going to have 5 NFL picks for you guys to lock in for this Sunday NFL betting slate, one of which we are taking to a pretty juicy ladder climb. So it's going to be 5 bets total, 1 juicy ladder climb, because of course we have to have some sort of ladder going on. It's been a really, really good NFL season. I'm incredibly pleased with how things have gone this NFL season. Up over 36 units on the year, up over 19% ROI on the year as well. Very, very pleased with how things are going. Hopefully we can continue this success in week 18, and then hopefully we can continue this success in the playoffs as well. Would appreciate it if you guys could click the subscribe button. Of course, that helps me out a ton. If you could like the video, if you could comment, that stuff would help me out a ton as well. And then I also would appreciate it if you could just check out the links in the description of the video if you want to support the channel. Links in the pinned comment as well, just stuff that I'm kind of doing, again, if you want to support the channel. But we can get right into these plays. So as I've been doing recently, we're going to go ahead and share our screen here. And the first bet that we are locking in is Tyler Algier over 33.5 receiving yards, minus 110 odds you can get at bet 365. So for this one, I decided not to take a pumped up number. I just wanted to take it at the over 33.5 number to not mess with anything. For backups, you never really know how much work they're going to get. So I just wanted to be as safe as possible with this one. But that 33.5 number, he's only hit it in 7 of 16 games, but he is averaging about 37 rushing yards per game, and the median is 32.5 as well. So even though he's only actually hit in 7 of 14 games, it doesn't actually look as bad as just that raw number 7 of 16 feels. Less than 50% feels gross. It's actually been a little bit better than that. But the reason why this is a play, 100% of the reason, it's because of the matchup against the Carolina Panthers run defense. And this is per outlier.bet. I guess I should have said that at the beginning. I'm using outlier here. But as you can see, they've allowed the most rushing yards per game to running backs. But it's even worse than that sounds. If we go to a website that you could just look at rushing stats allowed to running backs, they've allowed 143.6 rushing yards per game. The next closest team is the Patriots at 116.4. They're almost 30 yards worse than the next closest team in terms of rushing yards allowed per game. And they've been bad over the course of the entire season. It's not like, they were just bad at the beginning. No, they've consistently been bad. Any time frame you want to look at. Let's look at since week 4. The Panthers are worse, and that number has gone up. Went from 143 to 148. Let's look at since week 9. Panthers are still the worst. That number has gone up to 158.8. You want to look at it since week 12. Still the worst. Number has gone up to 159.8. No matter what time frame you look at, the Panthers are the worst run defense in the entire NFL. And I get that teams run on them a lot too. Granted, they're only the third most attempts, but the most yards. So teams do run on them a lot, but a lot of their advanced metrics are terrible as well, which I'm going to show you. DVOA is a website that I like to look at just for kind of some advanced stats. Looking at the rush defense DVOA, ranked number 32, that would be the Carolina Panthers. So not even like betting specific, just like how good is their run defense over expectation, the worst in the NFL. Now, why are they the worst in the NFL? Another website that we're looking at here is Fantasy Points. So we know that they've given up the most rushing yards per game by like 600 yards. Granted, this number includes quarterback scrambles and stuff. We know that they're the worst, but like their advanced metrics are terrible too. One stat that I like to look at is stuff rate. And you can see the definition here. Stuff is any run that doesn't result in a first down or touchdown, less than 4 yards on first down, less than 3 yards on any other down. The Panthers have the worst stuff rate in the entire NFL. 32% of their plays get stuffed. That's really bad. Another stat in which they're really bad, yards after contact per attempt. So teams, they're not stuffing anybody. When they make contact, are they able to bring them down? No, they have the 3rd worst yards after contact per attempt in the entire NFL. That's really bad. Another one that I like to look at is adjusted yards before contact. This is a little bit different. Like you can look at yards before contact where you see they're the 2nd worst, so that's bad. But this number is a little bit different because it's adjusted. So all this number does is takes out scrambles, takes out trick plays, QB kneels, takes out wide receiver runs, anything like that. Just looks at like normal run plays. How far do players get before they get contacted? The 2nd worst in the NFL. So like if we put all those things together, they have the 3rd worst yards after contact in the NFL and the second worst yards before contact in the NFL. Just shows you an absolutely horrible run defense. If you're bad before contact and after contact, I mean, those are both of the things, right? Someone's getting contacted when it's really bad for the Panthers. And Tyler Algier, his season high is 105 rushing yards. That happened against the Carolina Panthers. Now, he had 18 carries in that game. If you look at the season, that's a season high in carries at 18. I'm not expecting him to get to 18 carries. That is unlikely. But he's averaging 4.8 yards per carry. He should continue to average 4.8 yards per carry. And he's probably going to get between 8 and 11, 12 carries. Because, I mean, like 3, 0, 3. Like, those are outliers. He's probably going to get more attempts than the average he has of 8. And even if he gets 8, I'd be very comfortable if he gets 8 attempts that he's getting 33 yards against this defense. So our first play, Tyler Algier, over 33.5 receiving yards. Again, -110 odds at Bet365. Absolutely love this one. All right, and for our second play, what we're going to go ahead and lock in here is Terry McLaurin over 59.5 receiving yards. This is also best offered at -110 odds at Bet365. This is another situation where I just wanted to take the mainline play as opposed to laddering this one. I mean, the Commanders need to win this game, right? Like, Dan Quinn has come out and said they're going to be playing to win this game. Even though they've already clinched a playoff spot, they need to win to get a better seed and to get a much easier first round matchup as well. So the expectation here is that the Commanders are going to play Terry McLaurin, that he's going to get a normal workload and everything like that. And I love this play as a fade of recent results, positive regression type of play. We see last week, he only had 5 receiving yards. Absolutely gross game. I had him 70 plus. He didn't even come close. Just a really, really bad game. But 4 straight games prior to that, he had at least 60 receiving yards. Now, one of them, he had exactly 60 yards, but look at the matchup. That was against the Eagles, the second best passing defense in the NFL in terms of yards allowed to wide receivers. And he had cashed it in 4 straight. Gross game, cashed it. Gross game, cashed it. I mean, you see kind of this like every other thing. And if he has a bad game, then normally he does bounce back, except for the first 2 games of the year. But those are also Jaden Daniels' first 2 games of his NFL career. But we can count on consistency for Terry McLaurin, and it's a pretty good matchup against the Cowboys. I mean, their run defense has been bad all year. Honestly, so has their pass defense. Like, you know, we can see per outlier.bet, they've allowed the 25th most. So it's the 8th most, so 25th in terms of receiving yards allowed to wide receivers. And if we just want to look at another stat to confirm that, we go down here, we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th most receiving yards per game to wide receivers. But they've actually gotten worse as the season has gone on. Like, if we look at the number, it's basically 160. If we look at the data since like week 9, they've actually allowed the 3rd most receiving yards per game at a slightly higher number of 172.6, but still the 3rd most since week 9. And a lot of their advanced metrics are pretty bad as well. If you just look at like yards per route run, the Cowboys, the worst defense in terms of yards per route run in the entire NFL. Yards per target, the 3rd worst yards per target in the entire NFL. Yards per reception, they're a little bit not quite as bad, still the 6th worst, which is pretty bad. And you look at like yards after contact per reception, the worst. They allow the most yards after contact per reception. So just a really, really bad run defense. And again, we love the consistency of Terry McLaurin. We also love the targets. We go back like last week, he had 7 targets. Now, he only caught 1 of them, which again, just a bad game. Those happen. But 7 targets is great. 6, 10, 8, 6. Gross game, that happens. 6. Gross game, that happens. 8, 6, 7. Like, he gets targeted a ton, and that's the most important thing here. And he cashed this earlier this year against the Cowboys with 102 receiving yards per game. And if we look at that against the Cowboys, 102 receiving yards per game on 6 targets. We can even do that on lower target volume. Granted, one of them was a super long kind of broken play at the end of the game. So that's why he went over, was because of that long play at the end of the game. But that still happened. He still did go over. And again, he's having a good year. He's averaging 65 receiving yards per game. So we're getting him over his average. He's hit it in 9 of 16 games this year. Just because he missed it last week doesn't scare me off at all. So in a plus matchup, I absolutely love going to Terry McLaurin over 59.5 receiving yards as our second pick of the video. All right, and for our third pick of the video, we're going to go with Courtland Sutton, 80 plus receiving yards. This is actually best offered at plus 165 odds at Bet365. Don't listen to the odds that you see on the screen here, because you see they only have DraftKings and Caesars. They're missing FanDuel, BetMGM, ESPN Bet, Bet365, a ton of books. So this is actually best offered at plus 165 odds at Bet365. So I just want to be very, very clear about that. But Courtland Sutton, this is a play backing a couple things. Number one, he is due a incentive if he reaches 82 receiving yards. He's going to get 500K. That's got to mean for something. I love this as what you hear me say all the time, fade of recent results. He's missed this in 3 straight games, so it's been a pretty gross stretch for him. Of course, he had cashed it in 4 of 6 prior to that, and in both of the games he went under, he had 70 and 78 receiving yards. So the floor had been really good. And I like this matchup against the Chiefs, not because the Chiefs are an incredibly juicy matchup for wide receiver props, but because they're going to be resting the majority of their starters, specifically including Trent McDuffie. McDuffie is a very good shutdown cornerback, so they're going to be missing him. And this Chiefs defense, especially against wide receivers, hasn't been nearly good as they were at the beginning of the year. And I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But for starters, just want to kind of highlight the fate of recent results that we're talking about here, because this is the nature of wide receivers. I mean, wide receivers have ebbs and flows over the course of the season. Like you'll have gross games from receivers, and just because he had 3 straight down games, again, that doesn't scare me off because he had hit it in 4 of 6 prior to that, and his target share has still been really good. I mean, even in the 3 games that he went under, 9 targets, only caught 3. 6 targets, he did catch 5 of them, but only for 50 yards, lower yards per catch, stuff like that. And then 9 targets, only caught 5, 56% catch rate is pretty gross. But if you're telling me he's going to get 9, 10, 8, 9, 10, 11 targets, I'll gladly take for him to get 80 receiving yards because, I mean, again, he did that in 4 of 6 games, and 3 straight games isn't going to scare me off. And the Chiefs, as I mentioned, they were a scary matchup at the beginning of the year for wide receiver props. Like if you look at the season, they've given up the 6th fewest receiving yards per game, specifically to wide receivers, but they've been steadily worse as the season has gone on. So if we go to let's go to week 4, that number goes from 6th worst a little bit down to 9th worst. And then we go from week 4 to week 6, a little bit farther down. They're closer to middle of the pack. Week 6 to week 8, it's the same thing. They're closer down to middle of the pack. So this isn't me saying that the Chiefs are like a juicy matchup that you definitely want to target. You know, they're not the Broncos, the Lions, the Vikings, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But they're definitely not a defense to be scared of. And the fact that he needs to hit 80 yards to make 500K, that's got to mean something. The fact that the Broncos need to win this game to make the playoffs, that means something. And then I love these fate of recent results, positive regression type of plays as well. So Courtland Sutton, 80 plus receiving yards. Again, best offered at plus 165 odds at Bet365. Don't listen to the numbers that you see on the screen here as our third pick of the video. All right, and for our 4th pick of the video, we are going to go with Justin Jefferson, 100 plus receiving yards. This is obviously in the Vikings versus Lions game. I was able to get this at plus 142 odds at FanDuel, so kind of the same thing here. Don't listen to the plus 114 odds that you see on the screen here. A little bit wonky with the alt lines, but Justin Jefferson, 100 plus receiving yards is absolutely a play in this one. Looking at the Lions defense, you simply cannot run on them. So teams opt to pass on them, and to put a little bit of numbers behind that, as you can see on the entire season, the Lions are allowing the 2nd fewest rushing yards per game at 66.1. This has been the case with the Lions for 2 years now. It was the case last year. It's still the case this year. They're a pass funnel. They refuse to let teams run on them, but you can pass on them. Now, with all the injuries that they've suffered, their defense has suffered as a whole. So their run defense hasn't been quite as good since week 8, week 9, stuff like that, but still very, very good overall. And again, on the season, 2nd fewest rushing yards per game. They're also allowing the 7th lowest rushing yards per carry as well, so not as good on a per carry basis. Granted, there's a ton of teams tied at 4, as you can see. But we look at the data since week 8, they are allowing the 4th fewest rushing yards per game. So there's still a very, very good run defense even since week 8. And then we want to look at how teams can pass against them. And this is multiple sources. Looking at Outlier, they allowed the most receiving yards per game to wide receivers at about 190. And looking at another source here, confirms that 190 receiving yards per game allowed to wide receivers, which is literally number 1 in the NFL. And they're also allowing the 2nd most receptions to wide receivers in the NFL as well. They're only behind the Minnesota Vikings, who we're going to talk about in a little bit, But again, it's been the case all year with the Lions. They're a pass funnel. It's been the case last year as well. And since week 9, they are still allowing the second most receiving yards per game to wide receivers. The only team ahead of them are the Broncos, who are allowing 200. A lot of that's inflated by one game where Jerry Jeudy just went off against them. So teams are refusing to run the ball against the Lions, but they are passing the ball. And looking at a website here, RotoWire, just looking at pass rate above expectation, the Lions have the 4th highest opponent pass rate above expectation. This is per RotoWire. So whatever their expectation is, teams are passing on them at the 4th highest number above that in the entire NFL. But on not only that, one area in which they struggled specifically is guarding number 1 wide receivers. So this is another website looking at DVOA. One thing that's really cool about looking at DVOA is you can look at like how teams guard wide receiver 1s, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, going all the way down to tight end, running back. How well do they guard the left side of the formation, whatever. But as you can see here, we were just filtering this by receiving yards per game allowed to the number 1 option. The Lions are allowing the 2nd most receiving yards per game to number 1 options in the entire NFL. We targeted a number 1 option against the Ravens yesterday, because for Saturday's props yesterday, but for Saturday's props. And as you can see, the Lions are the 2nd worst team, allowing, again, the 2nd most yards per game, specifically to number 1 wide receivers. And obviously, Justin Jefferson is amazing. We don't need to talk about how good Justin Jefferson is. He's hit 100 plus receiving yards in only 4 of his last 10 games, which doesn't sound amazing. One game he did have 99 receiving yards. In the games in which he goes over, 115, 137, 132, 144, 92 last week, so did not quite get there, but not in nearly as good of a matchup. And the targets volume is just insane. 14, 13, 11 targets in his last 3 games. This game is incredibly important for both of these teams. Whoever wins this game gets the 1 seed. Whoever loses becomes the 5 seed. So we know obviously these teams, obviously they're going to be trying, but in a game that's this important, I'm expecting Justin Jefferson to get targeted a zillion times. I wouldn't be surprised if he got another 14, 13 targets in this one. If he does, I'd be pretty confident that he also does get us to 100 plus receiving yards needed to cash out this plus money banger. Again, the best offered price is plus 142 odds at FanDuel. That is our 4th pick of the video. All right, and for our 6th and final pick of the video, we are doing a full ladder climb on Amon-Ra St. Brown. We're going 70 plus receiving yards, which you can get at minus 108 odds at FanDuel. We're going 90 plus receiving yards, which you can get at plus 235 odds also at FanDuel. And then we're going 100 plus receiving yards, which is plus 300 odds at FanDuel. And the odds will be on the screen at the end, and also with the unit sizes and stuff. But it's a full unit on 70 plus, a half unit on 90 plus, and a quarter unit on 100 plus, which is what we're doing for Amon-Ra. So again, don't listen to the odds on the screen here because the alt lines are a little bit wonky, but this is a play on Amon-Ra, very, very similar to Justin Jefferson, where it's a team that you can throw on and a team that you can't run on. So like the Vikings are allowing the 2nd most receiving yards per game to wide receivers, but you can't run on them. So we're looking at the data against running backs. They're allowing the 4th fewest rushing yards per game on the entire season, on the 5th fewest yards per carry, but again, tied with a couple teams. And they've been good over the course of the entire season. Like you want to look at the data since week 8, they're allowing, looks like the 6th fewest rushing yards per game, and they're allowing the 5th fewest yards per carry as well. They're just a consistently good running defense, but similar to that, wide receivers can have success against them. Look at the data since week 1. It's like almost the inverse of the Lions. Like the Lions are allowing the most receiving yards per game to wide receivers. The Vikings are allowing the 2nd most, as you can see, 186.1. But the Vikings are allowing the most receptions. So the most receptions and the 2nd most yards. And it's kind of similar for them where it's been the case all year. Like we go later in the year, we go till week 11. The Vikings are still allowing the 2nd most receiving yards per game, and they're allowing still the 2nd most receptions per game. And a couple things make sense about that, like DVOA. We see the Vikings have the 3rd best rush defensive DVOA in the NFL. So again, teams cannot run on them, but teams can pass on them. And kind of similar to the Lions, teams have a very high pass rate against the Vikings. As you can see here, they have literally the highest expected pass rate in the entire NFL. And the reason for that is because the run defense is incredible, but not only that, they're very fast starting offense. So like the Vikings, are consistently scoring on their first drive, their second drive, their third drive. They're always getting out to leads. So teams are constantly needing to pass against them. But another reason why I like backing Amon-Ra in this game is he lines up the majority of his routes in the slot. He is the predominantly slot receiver. He lines up more often than not in the slot. And the Vikings will allow damage to go to the slot receiver. This is on the entire season per fantasy points. We look at slot target percentage. The Vikings are allowing the 7th highest target rate go to the slot receiver, but that's gotten worse as the season has gone on. So we look at like the data from week 11 until now, that number goes from the 7th highest rate to the slot to actually the 2nd highest rate to the slot at about 38.1%. So yes, Amon-Ra, as I mentioned, lines up the majority of the time as the slot receiver. And as you can see, he's only hit 100 yards in 4 of 16 games this year. So it's been a little bit of a down year for Amon-Ra, but you want to see how he's performed against the Vikings. 2 of these were last year, 106, 144, 112. This one was obviously this year. And he only did that on 8 targets. Now he caught all 8, but 10 targets last year, 14 the year before. I get that like last year isn't always perfect, but he did get to 100 this year. So I'm very confident in the full ladder climb of 100 yards for Amon-Ra St. Brown. And then again, also taking him 70 plus for a full unit and 90 plus for a half unit. And that rounds out our 5th and final pick of the video. So 5 picks for you guys to lock in for this Sunday betting slate, one of which we are climbing to pretty juicy ladders. Again, it's Tyler Algier over 33.5 rushing yards, Terry McLaurin over 59.5 receiving yards, Courtland Sutton, 80 plus receiving yards, Justin Jefferson, 100 plus receiving yards, and then a ladder climb on Amon-Ra St. Brown, 70 plus, 90 plus, and 100 plus receiving yards. You can see all that on the screen here. Again, remember to like the video, remember to comment, remember to subscribe. Check out the links in the description of the video. Like some of the tools I use, I post in the description of the video just if you want to access them and use them for yourself. So check all that out to support the channel. I appreciate everybody for watching and have a good one.